Hi everyone and welcome back. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And here I'm Tarun Sharma and we were talking about NestJS Advanced Series 2023. And we have almost covered these two modules and we were approaching to finish the module second. So what we were just talking about TypeORM, how to manage the relationship. We also talked about TypeORM migration with the 3.x. And then we also talked about how to write the different entities with the relationships. Now I will be covering a couple of more videos which are focusing more on NestJS TypeORM because now we have TypeORM 3.x. So there are multiple options or multiple ways to create a TypeORM connection for your application, and then TypeORM transactions, the new way of doing a transactions, and how you can store the data using JSONB and how you can query, and then all those things, how you can do the joins using TypeORM, how you can just write a simple query builder. You can just create a query builder instance and just write a simple queries, and how can you do simple pagination with the TypeORM. So these are some of the concepts we are going to cover with a simple application. We are going to use the same baseline code which we have already created in the NestJS TypeORM APIs. So I just created a fork of this or clone of this and created a fourth application 04. And here we will be just talking about some entities, and we will talk about how we are doing all those things with the TypeORM 3.x. So let's get started. What we will do is first we will just do a quick recap. Here we were able to do migrate into TypeORM 3.x, and this is how we were doing. In ORM config we are creating data source now. That is the major difference from TypeORM 2.x to 3.x. This is how you are writing your ORM config.ts, and then when you wanted to access the database instance, it's still the same because we are using the same database module here in our application. If you see app module, I'm using domain module, and this domain module still using the same db module .4 root. So still you are just passing the entities, all the TypeORM entities, and this for root we already have defined inside this package, app database package, and this is my database module. Because people are often getting confused and they are still struggling to set up a NestJS with the TypeORM, because with the TypeORM 3.x lots of things will change, and if you don't get the dependency right, you will be just getting the random errors. So still you can use the same thing, TypeORM module.4 root async, and you need to just return an object which contains all those configurations like database URL, entities, synchronize, logging. These are the options which you are getting from the TypeORM module. And coming to the dependencies, like what all version we are using for this particular version. Here we are using TypeORM NestJS TypeORM 9.0 and TypeORM 0.3. That's a major change. And this also enables us to write a migrations and all those things. The migration script also has been changed. If you don't want to struggle, just follow up this particular one. So this is how you will write TypeORM migration generate, migration show, migration run, migration create. And this code is already on GitHub, so you can just copy it and start using it. You need to pass the ORM config which contains the data source object. If you are not passing the ORM config, then you will get an error that data source is not specified. And before running this, you already have a Docker running. I think my Docker is already running, which is Postgres container that is giving me my database. Okay, so let's say if I try to play with this particular code, cd apps. So we can start with this 04 and I can just run simple commands. This is just a copy of this project, and I can just do npm run migration generate. Let's say I wanted to just generate a migration file, and here I can pass test, like which migration file name you wanted to generate. So what it is looking at, it is looking at your database connections, like in the orm config.ts you have specified your database URL and all. If those are not correct, it won't generate the migration file, and it is just creating these migrations in the root. Because the thing is, inside ORM config now you are passing entities, So entities, it is taking these entities and the migration is inside src migration. So we don't have that folder, I think. Let me just see, will it create here? I think it was not creating inside the migrations folder. Here we have specifying the migrations directory. So it is creating the migrations inside the root folder. I mean, you can just copy and paste it inside the appropriate directory. And when you want to run the migrations, where it is looking at for the migrations, let's also see this. Let's say if I just delete all these migration files, let's keep this one. So if you see, it is creating the migrations file based on whatever the entities you see. So this is also a really nice change which I see. Earlier when I was creating these migrations files, what those migrations files were containing, just up and down syntax. So let's say food order. So what it is doing, it is looking at the entities and it is checking, okay, what all entities do you have, and inside apps it is creating inside 04 and this food order, right? So if you look into this table, what all migration syntax it contains, it is looking at your entities. So migration interface also has changed with the TypeORM 3.x. And I have already checked, okay, we are just using this database synchronization true. It is checking your entities and it is creating, this is the migration generate command. So it is just generating these migration files. And when you do migration run, what will happen is you already have the entities. From those entities we have generated these migration files, and it will apply those migrations and create a tables. So here if we see src migrations, so here in the ORM config we will check the migrations directory is source migrations. So what I will do, I try to just copy this inside a migrations, and now if I run migrations run, what will happen is it will look into this folder. Now the only slight problem which I see is when I'm just doing a migration generate command, it should generate the migrations into the migrations folder. So maybe I'm missing something here inside this data source object. So here, like, data source object contains all the properties, what all things you need. And here, because I have specified the migrations directory, but it's not creating the migrations there, I am just manually copying it there. But when I do migration run, obviously it will check that directory and this particular directory, and it is running the migrations. That is fine. So that is working as expected, whatever we needed. Okay, this is the migration table name and all the migrations has been created here. Now let's say if I just try to do migration generate food order v2, what it will do. So here I'm just trying to create migrations, no change in the database schema were found. So this is important, and they actually changed lots of things, because I remember I used to do TypeORM migrations in totally different order or different manner. What it is doing right now, I'm trying to generate a new migration, but there is no change in the database. How can I make some change? You can go to some of the entities and try to, let's say, if I'm just saying city, let's say address. So I'm just adding a, let's say, new column. And if I try to generate this thing, what will happen is it should try to diff. You can see it has generated this migration file and what this migration file contains. So let's see the code. Here it has generated this. Now you can see the migration file is simple. It has added an address which is character varchar no not null. And if I wanted to run this and apply to the database, what I will do, I will just copy and paste it here, and then I will apply the migration run, which will apply this migration to the database, and our task is done. So maybe we should be able to do it in the far better way. So if you see the real production application, how it really happens. I mean, you obviously, you won't be just generating all the schema from the entities. You can do it. I mean, when I'm just trying to do npm run when I start the application, and if I have this synchronized true here inside a packages app database source, here if I see the synchronized true here, what it will do? Synchronize will check your entities and your database. If there is a difference, then it will apply automatically synchronize the changes of your entities into the database. So for now I will keep it false, and you can start your application, but when you are making it true, whatever the changes you are doing in the entities will get applied to the database. So I make it a false, and whenever I'm changing a change in the entity, let's say I'm just creating a new relationship or whatever, you can always generate a new migrations directly. So here, let's say country, state, address. I will just put another thing is description. Now, earlier I remember it used to generate an empty migration file. Now there's a smart thing has been involved, that it is looking into your migrations. It is looking into your entities and trying to identify what has been changed in the entities with respect to the existing database tables. And I got it. Okay, there is some new column I have added. I will copy this into the migrations, and then I will just apply this migration change using migration run. So I think this is really nice, because with the help of this, I don't need to write any migration manually, because there is always a case where you can just end up writing a wrong SQL query in the migration, because here I don't need to research, okay, what query I need to write. Alter table restaurant address, add description column with the character varchar 255 not null, right? So all these things, like if I inside entities, if I'm setting it nullable true, default null, this is a change, right? And there is another column address. I'll just mark that default as null, and I think there is a nullable true. I'm fine if it is null, right? v4, you keep increasing the versions, and how it will execute in the production. What you need to do is you just need to change your code and apply those migrations manually locally, but you at the end what you are getting these migrations generated automatically. So in the pipeline you can just run these migrations and apply the changes in the production. So I need to copy this newly generated migration file here. What it contains is, it contains the alter statement, where I'm just dropping the not null constraint, right? I will run the migration and it has applied those changes on the database. So I think this approach is really nice, because how I visualize it while doing it on the production. Let's say I'm building a microservice. I will write these entities, and first I need to test everything is working. You just make the synchronized false, you generate the migrations and apply the migration. Okay, you got the database copy, your entities are there, and you got the initial migration file, SQL file. Even in the Prisma also it happens in the same way. It generates a single migration file which contains all your SQL statement for the entities. But after that, whatever the change you are doing in the entities, only those changes, after that whatever the changes you are doing in the database entities, only those changes will be reflected in the migrations. So you can see this nice and clean. Initially it was big because I did create 3 tables. After that I did small change. I created a version 2 or version 3, version 4. So when you want to run this in the CI pipeline, you can just run npm run migration run. So before deploying your changes, you can just run the migrations. It will apply the changes on your database and your code will be deployed. So this is the really one of the nice feature which I like with the TypeORM 3.x. It is automatically creating the migrations. Earlier I used to like Prisma for this particular feature, that you just do migration generate the whole SQL file, migration apply or migration run. It used to apply those changes in the database. So I think they are on the same line, and just like they are competitors, right? They are doing just they are trying to become best so that people can use them. Okay, so this is just a version 1, and I just wanted to target only the migrations here. This is how you can create your migrations. And for the production, it's always, you can just make the synchronized false, apply the migrations like this. And now in the next video, I will try to explain you what you need to migrate in your code when you are using TypeORM version 2 to version 3. That's important, right? Because there are some breaking change also, and there is a major changes in how we deal with the transactions. And I will also talk about, because this is also the same thing. Here what I'm doing is I am using TypeORM, but initializing the database connections is still the same for me. What I'm doing is I'm just using this DB module and just passing this whole TypeORM module